Hi, welcome to a special bonus episode of Wool Shift Dust, a Silo TV podcast. Luke is resting up for an academic conference tomorrow, but I snuck in a special guest. We have with us today Hugh Howey, author of Wool, Shift, and Dust, aka the name of this podcast, and also one of the executive producers of the Silo series on Apple TV Plus that just wrapped up its first season. Now, yeah, Hugh, I know you always say to expect failure because most projects fail, but now we're looking at definitely the most talked about show on Apple, maybe even the most talked about show overall right now. Have you let yourself celebrate this win?
I'm trying to. It's wild. I was just talking about this with a friend, how you try to keep your expectations in check. This is definitely not something you expect. Like, very few shows get this kind of hype and word of mouth and buzz. And I was worried we would release something, no one would be able to find it. Instead, it seems like it's everywhere. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm flabbergasted and thrilled.
I've heard a lot of people are signing up for Apple TV just to watch this show. So that says something.
Yeah, I mean, Apple is super happy with me right now because that's what they dream of. You don't
Yeah.
really make money on ticket sales the way you do with features, with film. The only
Yeah.
way these shows help the parent company make money is if people sign up to watch them.
Yep, indeed. Yeah, I mean, and I think Apple's content overall is worth it. Like, I'm an Android user when it comes to technology, but their content has really been knocking it out of the park. So I'm glad that Silo helps spotlight all of it.
Yeah, I'm also an Android user, so
Yeah.
but they are becoming, it's funny, at the same time that they rose to the top for prestige TV, Max dropped the HBO moniker, and it just seemed like a passing of the baton.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know for a lot of, especially genre fans, and Netflix has also really kind of dropped the ball on that. And it's nice to see Apple and to some extent, Amazon also kind of pick up the ball with these, because these genre shows are expensive. These are not cheap productions.
Yeah, they're expensive, and they require fans of the genres, and that's what you find in tech companies. I mean, it's very fitting. Apple is trying to build our future, and the fact that there's a lot of people who work there who are interested in sci-fi is not a
not a coincidence.
It's not surprising, right?
Yeah. Well, so I was wondering, what is the most exciting feedback you've gotten about this series? Now, we all saw the Stephen King tweets, of course.
Yeah, that's in the top 10 for sure. I mean, it's cool to get like the celebrity endorsements, but my mom has been turning her living room into a cinema every Thursday night. She actually does 2 viewings. She does a Friday for all of her friends, and they all come over to her house and pile into her living room. And just watching how proud she is of all this and her getting all of her friends into the show.
Yeah, that's got to feel good.
Yeah, and the opening night in Charleston with my family and friends, and just having a bunch of people from, basically my college years,
right,
be there to support the show together was a major highlight.
Yeah, the people who have seen, your lower moments and now see you rise up to success. That's got to be gratifying. Well, thank you for being kind enough to let me pick your brain a bit here. The general spoiler policy for this podcast is that we talk about any episodes that have aired. So we've got the whole season and the related part of the book. So spoilers are allowed for the first half of Wool. And then at the end, we'll do a special separate segment that will only go to the book club members. And that will be full spoilers. So all book spoilers.
Fun. Cool.
All right. So, yeah, you're really generous with your time. Like, you told me just before we started recording that, you've been recording podcasts all day. It seems like you make it a policy to make yourself available to people like me. So first of all, thank you so much for that. But I'm wondering, what made you decide to prioritize that, to always make time for that?
It's kind of always been my my policy. I enjoy this. I love talking about this world and these characters, so it's not a chore for me. But I also, when I was just starting out as a writer, I made my writing journey very public. I blogged about it and shared everything on Facebook, and it was with friends and family. People who knew me were the only ones who were following me. But just making myself available and interacting with readers and um, saying yes to pretty much every promotional opportunity created a wonderful feedback loop. And I got as much out of it, I think, as anybody else, because it kept me fired up, let me remember why I do this and stay engaged with the stories.
Right.
So yeah, it drives my passion. And I
Okay.
feel like this is how storytelling used to be. It was a very communal
Right.
endeavor. It wasn't like people in a writing cabin in the woods, walking out every 5 years with a novel. It was, it was a constant back and forth and learning from each other. And
Right.
so that's the way I view this industry.
Right. Yeah, it's how we kept our histories. Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, as an unpublished outside of games science fiction author myself, I really look up to people like you and Andy Weir, especially like not only for writing absolutely gripping books, of course, but for forging your own path in self-publishing. So I was wondering, when you made the decision to go that route, was there anyone you were looking up to yourself?
Yeah, there were, I was lucky to be chatting with a handful of people who had gone that route. And we were all kind of thinking the same thing, but none of us had seen this level of success that we thought was possible. So it was all hypothetical. And we were all just wondering if we were crazy or not.
Hmm.
Daniel Suarez was one that I remember early on. He wrote a amazing sci-fi book called Demon. And he couldn't find a publisher to take a chance on his work and just started selling, out of the trunk of his car, and it turned into a big success. A publisher of it later picked it up. And I love that book. And I realized, the route that you publish doesn't say anything about the quality of the work.
Right. Yeah.
It's just there was so much stigma to overcome at the time. So the decision was never easy. Looking back, it's easy to kind of rewrite that whole time period and make it sound like it was an obvious decision.
Yeah.
But I remember agonizing over it, for a long time and getting terrible advice from a lot of writers who said that this would.
What were the?
Well, the idea back then was if you self-publish, your career is over.
Right.
To almost at a conspiratorial level, like people thought if you self-publish, then publishers, if they read any of your stuff, they'll go like do research on you and find out you'd ever self-publish, and they would say, no, don't you know you're blacklisted? Like there was
Right.
that level of fear about self-publishing, and it seemed absurd to me, but I didn't know anything about publishing, and
Right.
these were all established folks telling me that I couldn't do it this way. And so it was really, really weird to forge my own path and run counter to everyone else's advice.
What would be your advice for someone who's trying to self-publish today in this current climate?
Put out the work that you're proud of and start working on the next thing. I think
Right.
the trap people fall into is one of spending time promoting like one book instead of thinking about like it might be your 8th or your 12th book. That's the one that you're most proud of, that readers help.
That connects.
That really catches fire. And the later the book, the better, the more of a backlist you'll have for people. So, just don't get hung up on that first book. You have to make it as good as you can, get it out there, and then start writing the next thing.
Right. Okay. And who are your go-to authors, books, or genres when you have time to read?
I read a lot of nonfiction, so I don't, and a lot of nonfiction, it's like kind of one book, and then you never, it might be 5 or 10 years between books if they're prolific. So I don't follow a lot of writers. I just kind of pick topics that I'm interested in. But for fiction, Amor Tolls is like one of my new favorite writers, and I just wait for his next book to come out.
What kind of nonfiction books do you like?
History, philosophy, technology, science, a lot of nature stuff, pretty much whatever I'm interested in learning more about.
Right. It's autodidact reading list.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of my writing comes from. Is I do a deep dive on a topic, and then it informs something that I might be working on.
Yeah. No, it shows in the details. Yeah, and so in terms of the show, you were on set recently, it looks like, based on that YouTube video you just published with Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah, that was actually from season one. That
Oh,
was an older
okay.
video, but I haven't felt brave enough to share. I might get in trouble for sharing that video, but we weren't really supposed to share anything from on set.
Uh,
But now that the first season's
right.
out, I think it's okay to share a couple of things.
No spoilers, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
um,
it sounds like filming's in full swing right now.
yeah, big time.
People are relieved that you seem to think the next season will be released next year. Do you think the writers' strike will play any role in that?
It shouldn't play any role in season two. I'm eager for this writer strike to end so everyone can get back to work. I've got a
Right.
lot of friends who
Right.
have projects on hold right now, which is unfortunate. And I'm a fan of a lot of shows, and I want Hollywood to keep making them. But the thing that could mess up is we need to keep working on season three,
Mhm.
and none of that can really go forward. Though it's impossible not for things to percolate while you're, you know, like everyone involved in the show is thinking about the third season, whether they want to be or not.
Yeah. And yeah, just for listeners in general, I just want to let people know that Luke and I talked a bit about the background development of this project, Silo, as you called it, the development heaven many years, and your philosophy toward these types of projects in general in episode 2 of this podcast, our second trailer breakdown. So I encourage anyone who hasn't to go back and listen to that as a companion to this interview if they want to know more about that. And I apologize that the sound quality then was not a step down from what you're hearing now. And also, you did a full AMA on the Silo series subreddit this weekend, so I won't be repeating anything discussed there. We talked about some of the things you said in our episode 10 breakdown, and I'll put a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to go browse through the full AMA. Uh, but I have a question from actually a friend of mine who I just got him started reading your books. So shout out to Bob, aka Deadeye Jedi Bob on Twitter. And he says, being a newcomer to the series, I have to say I'm fascinated with how this world is presented to readers. No one's holding our hands, so to speak. The reader isn't given page after page of the conventional history lessons in sci fi explaining how or why this world is the way it is. We learn about these characters by watching them go throughout their day to day life in the silo. More revelations are unearthed over time. We're in the thick of things as the characters are making such discoveries, and I find myself unable to put the series down as a result. And he asks, when you started Wool, did you know how it would end, or did you unearth the ending as you delved deeper into this unique world and its characters? And yeah, I know that Wool started as a standalone short story about Holston and Allison, but I guess at what point did your full story take shape in your head?
So yeah, when I wrote the short story, I knew how I wanted that to end. Though I will say, when I was writing it, I kept going back and forth. Part of me wanted to give the story a happy ending,
Okay.
and I just couldn't do it. But I kept
Mm-hmm.
thinking, like, God, man, I don't want to do this to these people.
But you did it so
So
many times.
yeah, and I think I know a lot of readers, when they're going through that first part, they go back and forth of what they think's happening, and I think they're
Right.
picking up on my hesitation.
Okay.
And uh, but that ended up wrapping up the first part of the way I had envisioned. When I got all this demand for more of this story, but everyone was dead, so I had to think about, okay, who's this story going to be about? And I didn't want it to be a Johns and Marge story, which is why they're
No?
the next to go. Yeah, they're
Right.
the next to go. Yeah, I feel like their story was kind of behind them mostly.
Okay.
We were
Okay.
getting them towards the end, and the only way their story could really move forward is for them to retire and be together.
Right.
And again, I was hesitated to do like a happy ending for them. So I thought, okay, I'm going to use these two characters as a bridge to introduce the star of
Right.
the bigger novel. And I wanted that to be a mechanic, and I dreamt up Juliet, and I thought, okay, what's the end? What's she going to go through in this story? And the main thing, and this is as far as I'll take the discussion of the plot, since we're in our season 1 spoilers only
Yeah.
discussion.
Season 1. So
I
halfway through.
I
Yeah.
knew I wanted her to like leave the silo, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and I had an idea of what I wanted the very ending of the book to look like, which has
Of the
already
first
happened.
book.
Yeah. Um, one of the best parts of this first season to me is when Juliet and her dad reconcile
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
connect over their misunderstanding of what happened in the past. And that to me was like a central theme of the overall novel. So it was
Yeah.
kind of cool that we got that in the first season.
Yeah, no, I said on the podcast that when I'm reading that part of the book, I'm like, Juliet, just go see your dad now, please.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I was pleasantly surprised to see them reconcile earlier in the show. Um, what's your favorite change from the books?
Um, I really like Walker as a woman. I think the relationship with Juliet is much stronger that way.
Yeah,
It's more, um, there's more goddess energy in that room than there is like adoptive dad. And when you think about what her mom, the tinkerer that her mom was in the show more than in the
right,
book, Walker really becomes like an adoptive mom
right.
in Silo in a way that Walker, the male version of Walker, is not in the novels. I think that was a very strong change. Um, I like I like Bernard. Bernard's complexity in the TV show is really interesting to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
that last conversation he has with Juliet before she goes out in episode 10 just shows what he wrestles with. I
Right.
never wanted him to be just an outright evil person
No.
in the books. And I think the show does an even better job than the books of having that nuance.
Okay. And who's your favorite show only character?
My favorite person who's only in the show, man, that's
Mm-hmm.
tough because there's a lot of cool characters added, but I don't even know his name. I gotta look at the credits. He's barely in the show, but the redheaded
Oh, Danny.
hacker,
Danny.
Danny,
Yeah. Yeah.
he is so natural on
Yeah.
camera. Like what I kind of wish is, there's this character in the book named Scotty that we got rid
Right.
of
Right.
because there was just too we couldn't get to it all. And I kind of wish we had made that Danny character Scotty,
Mm-hmm.
um, just to give homage to him. But I loved his um, performance, and I think if there's a way to play up his role in the future, it'd be amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm voting like Danny Lucas, Patrick Kennedy, Hacker Ring, take over the silo.
Yeah, Patrick Kennedy. Also, Patrick Kennedy is amazing, and
Yeah.
we were on set for some season two stuff with him, and just got to hang out a bit. And he is so easy in front of the camera. He's just
Mm-hmm.
like he has it what actors have to have, and I think as we figured that out during season one, we were able to like expand his role on the fly because he's so good.
Yeah, no, I mean, we talked about it in the podcast when we first saw him and that he was credited on IMDb as like 5 episodes or something. And we were like, oh, what are they going to do with this character? And then by the end of the season, we are like, we love Patrick Kennedy. He must not die.
Yeah, he's a flame keeper without knowing what the flame keepers are, and I love that about him. What's amazing is that he he gets in trouble in a way that's not life threatening.
Right.
He's like, but he's doing some of the same stuff that other people who are getting offed are doing. It's just
Mm-hmm.
amazing how nothing sticks to him. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, and it's funny the relationship with Juliet, how she's just always showing up at his door, and yeah, she saves him that one time, but she's always asking for bigger and bigger favors.
Um, I just hope he gets that watch. Like I'm
Yeah,
gonna
he
I'm gonna
deserves
I'm
it.
gonna I'm gonna send him a watch at some point for like the next season wrap or something.
Yeah, she got his apartment busted. He's arrested. Oh, but yeah, speaking of the Flamekeepers, who came up with the idea of the Flamekeepers? Because that's a show concept.
Yeah, it was a writers' room thing. It's one of the things I don't remember who came up with it. Yeah, I have no idea. But it was very early on. It was in the mini room where we were breaking out the seasons, because that's where he came up with Gloria,
Okay.
and her expanded role and all this.
Yeah, because Gloria in the book, she was Marnes's neighbor, and that was kind of what we heard from her.
Yeah, exactly. I think her performance was incredible,
Yeah.
but showing what why they kept her around, and if she hadn't helped Sims have a kid,
Right.
she'd be dead.
Yeah, that's what Luke kept saying.
It was so powerful the way she gave him everything so that she could stay drugged up. Like, it was such an inversion of the, usually the getting drugged up is the threat. And in this
Right.
case, it was like, we'll keep it from you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that just shows how desperate she was, and that was kind of the most heartbreaking, that she was giving
Really
up her
was.
principles. Yeah. Yeah, Luke and I talk a lot about the most emotional scenes. There's a lot of them, but what scene from the show impacted you the most?
The most. I mean, I cried several times watching the episodes
Me
with my
too.
wife, and probably when Juliet's father says that she never believed me about his wife,
Mm,
and Juliet says, "I know, I do." That tears me up every time.
yeah.
Like, you just think about what he went through and what he lost. A wife and two kids, and living alone. Just helping other people have families. That's his like daily job, and knowing
Right.
enough about the bad things that he's doing to feel some guilt, even if he doesn't know about all the other stuff.
Right.
So him getting her love and respect back was just heart wrenching for me.
Yeah, that was the episode that we Luke and I had split opinions. I called that like the most emotional scene, and he called the Martha trying to leave her workshop the most emotional scene.
That's also the time that she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
leave is really amazing. It's incredible how much she does just with her face and her hand. She's a phenomenal actor, and if you see her in other stuff, she's never the same person either. She doesn't play herself.
Right. No, we keep calling her a chameleon like every single time. Some people don't even know it's the same actress.
Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Yeah. And okay, so on the we did the sad stuff. On the flip side, what's the like best funniest line that sticks out in your head?
The funniest line, Marnes is the one cracking me up the most. I thought he was hilarious.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of which one of his jokes I like the best. I feel like almost every scene he was in, he was saying something that got me going.
He's Luke's
Um,
favorite character.
what was that?
Other
It's Luke's favorite.
Yeah, him and Billings.
Yeah, Billings too. Um, I don't know about funny, but my favorite like heartwarming scenes are just watching him and John's together. Like, their romance is so sweet.
Yeah.
And I think like maybe my favorite little moment between them is during a cleaning when John's reaches down and grabs his hand, and the way he
Yeah.
looks down
Mm-hmm.
and glances at her, it's like you can tell his heart's racing like a
Yeah.
middle schooler, and so much of their past is in that moment, and so much of what happens to them going forward is foreshadowed there.
Yeah. It reminds me of moments when in the books when they go and visit Dr. Nichols and he's telling them, the whole backstory with their family and they're just holding hands while they listen casually. Oh, that's one of
Yeah,
the things that tore my heart out the most, that whole romance.
yeah. I wish they could just like live the rest of their lives together.
Yes. So what's one thing that surprised you about the television production that you learned through your role as an exec producer on the show?
Uh, I was I was surprised at how much we would shoot and not use, like
Okay, yeah.
entire sets that we built, that we shot scenes on that just got cut, and realizing this show is better for not including every scene, like just knowing what to take out. Um, each episode could have been probably 10 or 15 minutes longer, and I don't know that
Yeah.
would have made them any better.
Uh, I mean, I would have loved 10 or 15 minutes more in the finale. I can say that. um, I guess you probably can't say if any scenes that were cut from the production.
Oh, Yeah, I don't know if I don't think I'd get in trouble for it. Uh, there was an investigation. It's from the book. There was an investigation into someone was stealing crops, and they find out it's a
The
rabbit.
bunny, yeah.
Yeah, and we actually built like hydroponic gardens, these big racks with real carrots in there, and some farmers, and this amazing scene with Holston and Marnes investigating it, and then Holston telling Allison, like recounting it while they're showing some of the investigation. And yeah, it's like really good stuff, but it would have gone in the pilot. It just didn't need it.
Right.
But we could have saved a lot of time and money to realize it didn't need it earlier on.
There's a whole fan theory that I might fuel a little bit that well, people were thinking that the bunny that we see young Juliet release in the one episode, it's obviously that bunny would be dead by the time that Marnes was doing this investigation. So I've decided that that bunny got together with another escaped pet bunny and
Yeah,
had bunny
it,
babies, and that's who was in the garden.
yeah, it's like a descendant, maybe
Yeah,
like grandparent. I don't know how long rabbits last, 6 or 7 years or something.
yeah, probably not 15 years. Yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely related. That's
All
canon.
right, it's canon. There we go. You heard it here. And what was it like filming your cameo in the last episode? Was it your first time doing something like that?
I think I think it was my first time, especially. I did some commercials when I was in college, which is also just standing around in the background. Um, but to be a part of a production that big was pretty wild. And also, I didn't tell any of the other, extras. They just thought I was like some other idiot like them,
Okay.
and they all knew what they were doing, and I had no idea what was going on. And I think they were probably wondering like why they would put someone so clueless, like, in such an important part of the stage. I was like just trying to learn on the fly. But it was so much fun because the wall screen was in front of us and it was
Yeah.
showing Juliet go out to clean. We're watching it happen.
So
Um,
had they had filmed that scene with her before and then they were showing it to you?
yeah, that was one of the first things they shot was the cleaning because it was one of the few scenes outside. And so we're all standing there like watching her clean and reacting to it. And it was the ultimate in kind of cosplay, like
Yeah.
to get to dress up in you be part of your world and part of the story was really surreal.
So if someone gets the opportunity to do a cameo or a walk-on role in a set, what's your tip for them?
Definitely do it. Like
Mm.
it's so cool to see how the sausage is made. Um, I think the hardest thing to learn is how to pretend like you're talking without talking.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
silent, pantomiming a regular conversation is so much more difficult than you would think.
Especially if you do it over and over, I assume.
Yeah,
Yeah. Am I correct in assuming AMC was involved in both this and the Beacon 23 production?
yeah, in different ways. AMC, they're the ones who optioned Wool to
Right.
begin with for TV.
Mm-hmm.
This is after I got it back from 20th Century and Ridley Scott for when they were going to make a feature.
Right.
So AMC was developing it, and Apple kept asking like, "Can we be involved? Can we be involved?" And so by the time Apple got involved, we had producers from both companies working together. So AMC had a huge role in how the story came together, and they were co-producing the season for much of the filming, and so I feel like I got the best of both worlds. And then with Beacon, someone else was developing it, and AMC did what Apple did to them. They're like, "Hey, can we be a part of this?"
Okay.
And so it's like AMC sold off Wool and bought into Beacon 23, and it was yeah. But I love the folks of both companies. But I've
Yeah.
I've done several things with AMC and just really like the team there, and love working with the folks at Apple. It's you can see how once you form relationships in the industry, you just want to keep making
Right.
stuff with the same people. Like
Because
you,
it
you can see
works.
why
Yeah.
directors work with the same actors, and
Right.
and all of that. It's just you develop a comfort level and an affinity.
Yeah. Yeah. We've noticed that a lot of the writers on this show have worked for previous Graham Yost productions.
Yeah.
But you can see that, yeah, you nurture a talent and give them opportunities to shine in new ways. Now, yeah, was there like, do you notice a difference between the productions, the Beacon 23 and Silo?
Um, yeah. Well, I spent a lot more time on the set of Silo than
Okay.
Beacon, and I was a lot more involved on Silo. The biggest changes, they're very similar. Both incredible writing teams and set production. Incredible cast on both. I'm interested to see what we have with Beacon. I've been less involved in like the post production, but it's I'm kind of where I am with Beacon. I was the same place with Silo, where I'm just keeping expectations really low
Okay.
until we get it out there. But
But there's 2 seasons filmed?
yeah, 2 seasons filmed, and yeah, they're both in post now. So I hope we get some news soon about when the first season will be released.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Okay, well, in Silo, then, what's one thing from the show or the books that people keep misinterpreting that you'd like to set straight?
That's a good question. Well, I wouldn't say misinterpreting, but I will say that people think the mystery of what's outside the silo is the most interesting thing. Some people think this,
Right, right.
which I I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that's super interesting. I think what's most interesting to me is what living in that silo does to people and why someone would have built it. Like
Right,
what's the origins of the place? And so I think it's the history of the silo to me is more fascinating than what's going on on the planet outside of it. And I
right.
and those are the mysteries that the book really gets deep into.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's just me. Like I'm more into like the psychology than I am the disaster story.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, no spoilers, of course, but they kind of go hand in hand in the end.
Yeah, that's true.
But, I studied psychology in college, and I think that's one of the things that I find so fascinating about, well, especially in Shift, there's a lot of put in interesting moral quandaries where you question what you would do in certain characters' places. Yeah. What's your favorite fan theory that you've seen from show only watchers?
I love the people who like think way outside the box, like
Mm-hmm.
people who will say maybe they're on a spaceship. Maybe this is like a
Right.
colony ship, multi generational, and this is to keep people from going insane. Let them think they're still on Earth. So I like when people get way outside the box like that. I also love people who try to figure out how this and the world of sand are the same
Right.
worlds.
Yeah, people want there to be a Howie verse, so better start writing it in.
Yeah, the problem with that is like, the people who just did a deal for sand for TV, if these are on the same world, then like who owns what?
Right. No,
It's a lot
exactly.
easier for these worlds to be
Yeah.
separate.
Yeah. Any sand adaptation news?
We haven't announced the deal yet, but it just got finalized a couple weeks ago. But as soon as we're trying to get some producers, some non-writing executive producers attached now, because we can't really do anything beyond that till the strike's over. But um, I have the same attitude towards this as everything else. I
Right.
doubt
Right.
anything will ever get made, but I'm excited to work with people and get some scripts written. That'll be fun.
And book 3?
Yeah, book three. I'm doing a couple of short books following up Balloon Hunter,
Right.
and then book three is the next big release, which I hope end of this year, early next year, we'll have that out.
Yeah, Balloon Hunter looked great. It seems like a success, right? It launched well.
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't even really try to launch it, but it's gone kind of crazy all on its own, and I love it because it's a very difficult book. It's like it's it's unusual. The fact that it's landscape format, first of all, is
Right.
kind of wild. But I know you've seen this, but
Mm-hmm.
it's it's a tricky book to read, and it's a fun book to interpret.
Tricky to read because of the postcard format?
Yeah, because the postcard format, and also we don't spell out stuff. So
Right.
at
Okay.
the end, you kind of have to sort out what happened. I think it's clear, but you might have to read the last few pages a few times to see how dark we went with it. And
so that's the hint. Think darker.
That is the hint. Think darker. But the sequel is going to surprise people, so we're excited to get that out.
Okay. Yeah, and okay, so about back to the other darkness, Silo. What is the pet policy, I was wondering? Because in the books, I had the idea that they were illegal, but in the show, clearly people have pets.
Yeah, I think that was just writers putting their own preferences in there. There's a lot of dog and cat owners on the writing team, and I don't think they liked my idea that pets
were food.
Like, and the pets were just not allowed, like too much, too light, too making people too happy.
But if you want to keep people docile.
Yeah, it seems like in the show, anything, like there are people that had cats and dogs, and so it's kind of all over the place, but I'm happy with whatever they decide. There's plenty of room.
That wasn't a stickler for you.
Nah, I didn't care. I prefer pets, but the book is much more dystopian. The only place there's really any kind of music or art is just in the marketplace. It's not all over like it is in the TV show. So they did not want to go as dark as I was.
Are we ever going to see that flashback with the play? Sorry, that's a slight book spoiler, but not really.
I don't think we have that, but I pushed for that. I thought we should have had, because I love the young Juliet. Like I thought those flashbacks were great, and I wish we would have had that. The closest thing we have, of course, is in the pilot. Allison is at one of the plays where they're giving a little talking about the founders and the uprising. But I wish we would have worked in a Romeo and Juliet thing.
It was nice to see the Nichols parents happy.
Yeah, exactly. There were other scenes that I was really pushing for. Like I wanted Lucas to invite Juliet to dinner one night because she wasn't, eating. She worked in the cafeteria, but she was never really eating. And I was going to push for him pointing that out and saying like, look, let me come over for dinner. And when she showed up, it was like him and his parents. It was like family dinner, and just the discomfort of Juliet in that setting, I thought would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, because you said that you're often the one that pushes for changes in this show.
Yeah, I think add more instead of truncating and taking away. Like let's flesh the world out even more.
Yeah. Okay. Last question for the non-spoiler section. So we like to highlight from time to time the work of crew members who really made this show. And for instance, we've talked about Pippa Broadhurst design work. Is there anyone else on the crew or production side whose work you think deserves a special mention?
Well, Gavin and his whole team. Gavin ran production design. What they built is just astounding. Like with the genius.
The set and the stairs.
Yeah, the staircase, the silo. Like there was a room full of 3D printing machines and architectural pusher board models and blueprints running, all day, just spitting out what the build team needed to create. And you forget that, like, you can't just, like, people were using these stairs. People were running and fighting. Like, these were steel girders and poured concrete, and it had to be robust and functional. And that means you're actually like kind of building a piece of the silo. And that's a huge undertaking. I was shocked at what was involved in that and how they pulled it all off. But I think he and his whole team just deserve an Emmy for sure for building this set.
I mean, I think a lot of people feel like members of the cast and writing crew and everything deserve Emmys all around in this show. So
yeah, I wish, I think David and Rashida deserve recognition, but you rarely get nominations when you're only in an episode or two. But it doesn't take away from just the quality of what they put on the screen. It was unbelievable.
Well, the fact that people are so desperate still that they're still alive tells you something about what an impact they made. That was 10 episodes ago, and people are still like, no, but you're telling me they're really dead?
Yeah, it is brutal. But you can always go back and watch those first episodes again and spend time with them.
That's true. And read that section of the book. And that concludes the show-only section of my talk with Hugh Howey. Though we did continue on for another half an hour talking about book changes and what's coming in future seasons. If you'd like to continue listening to the rest of that conversation and you don't mind book spoilers, you can find it in our new Silo Series Patreon book club feed. Link in the show notes. If you're interested in reading the books yourself or would like to have all of the important plot points summarized for you with all the important twists, the Patreon Silo Book Club is where you'll get all of that insider book reader intel. Stay tuned to meet Sam and to find out how you can listen to the rest of my interview with Hugh Howey and get all of the Silo Book Club details right after this quick commercial break.
Okay, here's how Miro works. See, it's amazing.
What's everyone doing at David's desk? Ever since marketing started using Miro's collaborative online whiteboard, he thinks all our other teams should sign up. Why? He says Miro's making his meetings disappear. And if every team gets on it, that means even less meetings. They're using Miro for brainstorms, mind maps, customer research.
So could we use Miro instead of having another 100 meetings for every round of feedback?
Yep. You can comment, react to ideas, even leave a recording on the board.
And what about presentations?
There are Miro templates for that.
How do you know so much about Miro?
I've actually been using it all along. I just used a Miro board to plan the best vacation.
Okay, I'm on board.
See how Miro users save up to 80 hours every year by meeting less and doing more. Get on board at Miro.com with 3 boards free forever. That's MIRO.com.
Welcome back. For anyone interested in learning more about the Silo Book Club and in hearing the rest of my interview with Hugh Howey, you can find all of that information and episodes coming up breaking down each of the books one at a time and then the entire first season of episodes 2 at a time, focusing on all of the juicy book spoilers that I had to bite my tongue about all throughout the regular Woolshift Dust season. You'll find all of that at patreon.com/woolshiftdust, one word, and you'll find that link also in the show notes. And my partner in crime, helping me unlock all the secrets of each of the books from Wool through the Silo short stories, is Sam from Silo TV fans fame. With our gag order completely lifted, we finally get to share all of our thoughts and theories about the first season, including what's going on with the digger, that tunnel, and what Gloria says they're putting in the water. Now, bringing their own hot takes to the table, I know from previous conversations that Sam and I didn't always agree on what did and didn't work in the television adaptation. So expect some multifaceted opinions about the book-to-show transition. And speaking of which, I have Sam here with me right now. And hey, Sam, welcome to Team Woolshift Dust. Though you've been an unofficial third member of the pod basically all season. Sam, you and I have a lot in common, but definitely some differences too. In terms of thinking about Silo and our general personalities, what would you say are the biggest things we have in common and the biggest differences that we have?
Hi, thanks for making me a part of the family officially. I think the biggest thing we have in common is our love for seeing the books come to life. We also both seem to have a soft spot for the underdog characters, but I'm sure we'll talk more about them in a minute.
Yeah, that's true, huh? We like the puppy dogs, don't we? And yeah, as you've probably noticed, Sam is using text-to-speech software to record this podcast with me. This is a recent development in their life, and I wanted to give Sam a moment to talk about what's going on with them. So, Sam, if you feel comfortable, please share a bit of your story.
If you have been around my account for a while, you will know that I've been semi-open about my cancer illness. A few months ago, I had brain surgery to remove a tumor, which worked. But during the operation, there was a complication that meant that my speaking ability was compromised. This was a known risk going into it. While I am hopeful that I will regain some of my speech with time and lots of speech therapy, for the time being, I rely on sign language and lots of writing. Alicia and I had vague plans for doing an episode together, and my surgeries came in the way of that. So it feels extra special to get to do even more than we had originally planned.
Yeah, I really wanted to do this book club with you. We've been talking through the book spoilers ever since the TV show began. And I can't imagine doing this with anyone else. So I'm really thankful that text-to-speech software is advancing enough, even the versions that we have access to, that we can make this happen. So you might hear us tweaking the voice as we go, but it should add an even more fun dynamic to our banter. Sam, now you and I bonded over the very things we're gathered here to discuss, the books Wool, Shift, and Dust by Hugh Howey, and the TV adaptation that came of them. Can you tell us a bit about when, where, and why you picked up these books? What's your Silo story?
A bookseller recommended Wool to me when I asked for a dystopian read. But I didn't form the emotional connection that I have to these books now until I read Shift in rehab. It was basically the only thing that kept me sane while I tried to find myself again, sort of. It sounds like a joke, but I truly haven't stopped talking about these books since then. All my friends are glad I finally found my crowd for these talks, so they no longer have to fake interest.
Yeah, I think we're all grateful for the Silo Squad community. And yeah, it's incredible when we're able to connect with storytelling like this in a way that moves us and gives us something to hold on to. Now, you and I have obviously been able to talk a bit more about your experiences, and I know what this has meant to you. Yeah, for me, it's a different story, but it's kind of the same. I fell in love with the books, and I don't know, maybe I think I fell in love with some of the vulnerabilities of the characters we've talked about in there. You know, we've talked about loving the underdog, but also characters like Walker, who is one of the first characters I've seen in print who had an anxiety disorder that wasn't used as a comedic trope. So yeah, the series, they're page turners, they're thrillers, but they're also books with surprising emotional depth too. So for our book club, which book are you looking forward to talking about the most, and why is it Shift? No spoilers, please.
Well, there is obviously the emotional reason I already mentioned. But mostly this is where Hugh came into his own in terms of world building for me. I try my best not to be the "oh, just wait" kind of book fan, but I do have to bite my tongue when show-only fans talk about the world building of Wool. Sure, it's great, truly. But, just you wait.
Yeah, it's true. Wool's full of all of these mind-blowing reveals, but then you get to Shift and you're like, oh wait, that was just like kiddie pool time. Yeah, Shift is definitely where you find out how it all came to be and why and where. And yeah, I think the moral questions it asks are questions that really tend to linger with people long after they finish the books. Yeah, that's one of the reasons people get so excited about this book.
And the drama.
And the drama, yep. Although there's some great action in Wool, there's great action throughout the entire series. Okay, well, I know Sam and I are both eager to break out of the spoiler shackles, so we're going to continue a more spoilery conversation right after the other half of my interview with Hugh Howey. You'll find that episode, plus all the other upcoming book club episodes, in the Patreon book club feed at patreon.com/woolshiftdust, one word, link in the show notes. And we're asking a small fee per episode, basically the minimum recommended by the Patreon fee structure. This gives you access to an exclusive feed only for book club members. Plus, you'll be able to participate in polls and future discussions as the episodes roll out. And of course, these ad-free episodes are a better way to help us support the cost of running this podcast that you're listening to right now. The more costs we can cover, the more time and money we can devote to producing better episodes faster. And we're asking for a pledge per episode and not per month because we want to make sure that we're only charging you for episodes when they're produced and that you're not paying anything during the off months. So, Sam, for listeners who don't yet follow you, and any Silo fan really should, where can they find you?
At Silo 17 Squad, mostly crying about Lucas and Scotty right now. Thanks, Hugh.
He does like to make us cry, doesn't he? And you can find me also on Twitter and on most other social media at AliciaCB, spelled out in the show notes for you. And if you're new to the feed and you like in-depth coverage, picking apart your favorite shows lovingly, I invite you to go back through the feed and check out my political historian who hasn't read the books co-host Luke's in-depth analysis of this season. And we are members of the Lorehounds network, publishers of this podcast. This is a network full of content covering shows, films, books, just like this. You'll also find me co-hosting Lorehounds MC Universe episodes, now covering Secret Invasion, and an upcoming one-shot we're going to do about Barbenheimer. You'll definitely find me at the double feature. I also want to welcome new to the network podcast, Properly Howard, with Steve and Anthony. They do fun movie reviews asking, is this better or worse than the average Ron Howard movie, or is it Properly Howard? And of course, they had to kick off their time in the Lorehounds with a review of Howard the Duck itself. And you'll also find me and the Lorehounds in an upcoming episode talking about the 2021 Villeneuve version of Dune Part 1. And some other shows I'm enjoying in the Lorehounds Network. I'm finally catching up on the shows Mrs. Davis and the White House Plumbers, and I'm really glad to have their coverage to go along with those watches. Now, I'll be back in your ears in this feed with Luke one last time for this season for a special bonus crossover episode with the Lorehounds, where we wrap up the season and hand out our awards such as Best Comedian, Best Death, and all the rest. But for those of you who are ready to have the wool lifted from your show content only eyes, we'll see you in the Silo Book Club. The first Silazins have already moved in, and we want to give a special shout out and thank you to our founding book club members. We have Rebecca Goller, Niall Matotle, Mick D from New Zealand, Michelle E, John J, Travis T, and I have to give a special thanks to Rebecca Fan and Deadeye Jedi Bob, who went above and beyond in their pledge. Thank you so much to all of you for helping to make this podcast possible, and you will get your first pick of apartments up top. As for the rest of you, we look forward to you joining us, because while the founders may be mysterious, we have all of the inside info that Bernard only wishes he knew.